On your Tuesday episode of Locked On Raptors, did the Brandon Ingram trade set the Raptors up to run back Vision 6-9 again? Just maybe. We'll get into that and many more of your mailbag questions coming up on today's show. Thanks for hanging.
You are Locked On Raptors, your daily Toronto Raptors podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey! What's going on? And welcome to another episode of Locked On Raptors, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is Tuesday, February the 11th. And I'm your host, Sean Woodley. I've been covering the Toronto Raptors now for 11 seasons on various platforms. You can find all my work over on Blue Sky. You can also find the show on Instagram, and you can join us in the Locked On Raptors Discord server. Link in the description of the podcast. Great place. Come hang out, talk ball with friends who like the podcast, want to hang out, and don't want to do work all day. Great place to be part of our listener community. Please go do that. Link in the description of the podcast. It's free to join. As always, also free is the daily Locked On Raptors newsletter, where you get my original words 5 days a week. You get Katie Heindel, League at Large takes 4 days a week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday. On Thursdays, fill in the gap, you got Michael Shearer from Basketball Poetry with great breakdowns, X's and O's stuff. It's a wonderful proposition. It's free. Again, you can go to the QR code on the screen if you're watching on YouTube, or to the link in the description of the podcast if you're listening to the podcast, and it's much appreciated when you go support the newsletter. It's great. We loving the support, loving the feedback. It's been great. Of course, today's show is a mailbag episode. We're going to dig into a whole bunch of questions from you, the listeners. I'm also going to do the overflow questions in the newsletter later on today as well. We got questions about, if not Cooper Flagg, then who in the top 5 of the NBA draft? A big, dumb summer fake trade that could come to pass. We'll get into that. And of course, some more stuff, NBA Cup stuff, Jacoby Walters stuff. But let's start off with our first question here today, which comes from Barney Bass in the Discord, asking, seems like Brandon Ingram, although having wing size, as guard skills in dribbling and shooting, can you see him as the 2 guard in different lineups, possibly having Mobo play the 3 spot for a huge lineup? I don't know. We'll see, obviously. What the team looks like this year and next year with Brandon Ingram is going to be very different, right? We know down the stretch of this season, they're probably not going to be playing all of their guys all the time. It's going to be a lot of rookies. I don't think we're going to get a great sense of what the sort of optimal lineups and the different ways in which Darko Rajakovic can play around with the chess pieces. Like, we're not going to get a good look at that, I think, between now and the end of this season. We might get glimmers. We might get little flashes. We might see guys who get heavy run down the stretch kind of stake a claim to be part of major core lineups for the team next year, for sure. But will we actually see these lineups fully deployed? I have my doubts. As far as just in terms of this version of the team, with the players they currently have on the roster, Brandon Ingram playing the 2, I guess in this situation, to sort of go into Barney's scenario here, you've got Emmanuel Quickley at the 1, Brandon Ingram at the 2, Scotty Barnes or Jonathan Mobo at the 3 and the 4, and then Jakob Poeltl at the 5. I think that lineup's pretty tough to square, just because there's like no shooting in that lineup whatsoever. It's Quickley, it's Ingram, and then we've seen Scotty Barnes really struggling from downtown. Jonathan Mobo, I like that he's eager, but he's not someone that defenses care at all about right now. When it comes to, him taking wide open threes, there's a reason all of his threes are open for days. They're going to keep on letting him take them until he proves that he can make them at a high clip for a long sustained period. And then Jakob Poeltl, we know, just is not someone who's going to space. Poeltl obviously creates space in other ways. He's a fantastic screener. He gets guys into open spots. He obviously can do stuff from the elbows and pull himself away from the basket a little bit. There's lots that Jakob Poeltl does as a non-spacing big to actually create space within the half-court offense. But when you're that cramped and you only have 2 viable shooters, one of whom in Brandon Ingram, we're not sure if he's actually going to be like an eager let it rip 3-point shooter. He's going to have to be for this all to work. There's no doubt. He's got to raise up the volume. He's got to be someone who's eager to stand in the corner from time to time and let it rip when it comes to him in the flow, or be a second side creator and attack out of that. But he's going to have to do a lot of his work from the 3-point line and in. And it's just going to have to be part of the deal for this whole thing to work. We've talked a lot about the adaptation both he and Scotty Barnes are going to have to be open to for this partnership to work. Again, I'm optimistic that Darko Rajakovic, a guy who's been able to elicit buy-in and improve guys just by kind of having them do a specific thing that they do well. tailor their game a little bit more to what the team needs. Like, he's had a track record of doing this. RJ Barrett, obviously, the single biggest example of this. I'm optimistic Darko can have some success at getting Ingram and Barnes to buy into varying up their shot charts, to playing from different spots on the floor, to working in concert with one another, as opposed to kind of stepping on each other's toes in the areas they both currently like to operate in right now. But that said, like, there's only so much you can do with no shooting. And so I don't think that quickly Ingram, Mobo, Scotty, Pirtle lineup makes a ton of sense right now. I do think the idea of Ingram, Scotty, and Mobo as a 3-4-5 is pretty interesting. I know Mobo is only 6'7", but we talked about this in yesterday's show. His functional size is just way beyond that. I know people get, oh, you can't be a 6'7" center. Like, I don't know if your arms are 7'4". Maybe you can. Maybe it doesn't matter. He plays huge. He's a rebound vacuum. He's just kind of really great at occupying space, using his standing reach to sort of serve as height. I think there's a world in which Jonathan Mobo can be a really nice small ball 5 in lineups that feature Ingram and Scotty Barnes going forward. And that gives you a little more leeway with the shooting, right? You can throw some more shooting in at the 2, whether it's Jacoby Walter, Ochai Agbaji, Gradey Dick, someone like that. Like, that gives you a little bit more stretch and space to kind of make it all work. And if Scotty Barnes is like an eager 3-point shooter and is willing to, again, he's going to have to be better for defenses to care, obviously. But, if he's willing to, take those spot ups and not sort of, suck the life out of the room with the pull up stuff, like, there's a way in which this all works, right? If Mobo becomes someone who can hit perfunctory threes in the corner, maybe defenses don't care, but if he's hitting 36% of threes that come to him, then that's great. Eventually defenses will have to adapt to that. That can give you a little bit more leeway in space and room. I do think there's something to this idea of Mobo being a guy who unlocks a lot of lineups. I'll probably talk about this a little bit more in the newsletter as well, because he's got a similar Mobo question. So, we'll expand on him a little bit more there too. But yeah, I also think like what they do in the summer is really fascinating for how this all comes together, and what the draft bears. We'll get into that coming up in a second here. That's also going to be interesting to see how this all sort of fits and where Ingram's able to slot it in certain lineups. I mean, there'll be some lineups, I'm sure, where the Raptors go small and it's Scotty at the 5, Ingram at the 4. Maybe that's light on rebounding. Maybe that's light on size overall. But if you're just like big across the board, that's workable. Right now, they don't really have the pieces to do that. But I wonder, as Mobo comes along, what they do in the draft. Do they get another 6'9" guy in the door? There's a lot of them at the top of the draft. Like, look, man, I made the joke off the top. Vision 6'9". It very well could be back in a sort of new iteration here with the addition of Brandon Ingram, who elongates so many of their lineups. And now they're just like 1 or 2 pieces away, whether it's Mobo hitting or someone in the draft or someone they pick up in sort of a rebalancing trade, whatever it might be. They're not far away from once again being able to achieve Vision 6'9" style basketball. Now, is that bad? If they don't have the requisite skills to play functional basketball, 100% it's bad, because that was the thing that did in Vision 6'9" last time around. I am a believer in the concept of get a lot of really big players and see how they can do. Basketball is won by talls. This is just kind of how it goes. And if you can get enough guys who are 6'8", 6'9", or above that have all of the requisite skills you need to play functional basketball, someone who's got center skills, who can set screens and dive and protect the rim despite being smaller than your typical 7-footer. I think Mobo, for example, is a guy who profiles as someone who might be like that defensively. Same with Scotty Barnes. We've seen Scotty Barnes have a lot of success as a center, as a screen and dive man, as a small ball 5. Like, that's worked for him in the past. If you have that, plus you have creation ability, Brandon Ingram provides a little bit of that, right? He's a better pick and roll creator than probably any of the guys the Raptors had on the previous version of Vision 6'9". Obviously, Siakam, I think, was a very good gifted pick and roll operator as well, but he was very much kind of like this probing ISO guy, where it took a long time for his possessions to develop. I think when he's working with a guard like a Kyle Lowry, it's a little bit different. That sort of inverted pick and roll action was such like an instant cheat code for buckets for the Raptors for a long time. Maybe someone like Emmanuel Quickly helps in that with Brandon Ingram, right? And you can kind of run those inverted pick and rolls with Quickly and Ingram. Like, I do think eventually, there's like a limit to the number of guys you can get that have Vision 6'9" capable skills that, again, give you all of the skills you need on a floor for basketball to run smoothly. But Ingram, Scotty, Mobo, someone in the draft who we'll talk about in a second here, a couple of guys in the draft who might fit the bill. that kind of changes the calculus. And, a different combination of guys who were 6'9" playing the 2 through 5 could, in theory, work better than the previous combination of guys that did that. Like Precious Achiuwa, for example, was tasked with being the center in those lineups a lot. He's just not a center. He doesn't do center things very well. He was way more wing than center when he played for the Raptors. Maybe he's got more center instincts now that he's playing with the Knicks, but for the most part, he just didn't really do the screen and dive stuff. He didn't do the short roll creation stuff. Like it just didn't really work. And, even though he was 6'9", but super athletic, I don't think he really used his size that well defensively either, right? He was an okay rim protector, not a great one. Way more a guy who could just kind of harangue guards and wings in space. You need that proper rim protection. You need point guard skills and creativity and all of that for it to all work, no matter what size of guys you have on the team. If you can collect a whole bunch of guys who are huge who do that stuff, you're in pretty good shape. And that would, in theory, allow Brandon Ingram to play the 2, which, to answer the original question, I do think his skill set could totally lend itself to the 2 if he's willing to let it rip from 3, right? That's a big part of this. No matter what position he's playing, that's got to be part of the calculus here for it to all really work, and for the fit concerns that I still have about this trade and what it's going to mean for the team on the floor, for them all to be kind of ironed out and solved. We'll come back into the side, get into the draft, and, ways the Raptors can add to the mix of players they have. If they're picking in the top 5, you will get into Cooper Flagg. Obviously, that's pretty fun if they can land him. But what are the fits of the other guys? Who's the best option on the board if the Raptors do, say, move up to 2 or 3 and have their pick of some dudes? We'll get to that. And as we continue the mailbag, we will get to that as we continue the mailbag coming up in just what's that. Today's show is brought to you by OpenPhone. Running a small business means you're wearing a lot of different hats. Your personal phone becomes your business phone, and before you know it, you're juggling customer calls all day and night. As your team grows, it becomes impossible to manage everything with just your personal number. That's where OpenPhone comes in. It's the #1 business phone system designed to help you keep your work and personal life separate. I work from home. I struggle with this quite a bit, the sort of separation of when is work over, when does the evening begin? And this would be a wonderful way to kind of keep my business stuff away from my personal phone and have it all be separate. It's a great thing. For just $15 a month, the cost of a few coffees, you can get complete transparency and visibility into everything happening with your business phone number. OpenPhone works through an app on your phone or computer and integrates with tools like HubSpot and hundreds of others. It also uses AI-powered call transcripts and summaries, so you'll have a rundown of your calls to action and the items the second you hang up. And if you miss a call, no problem. Automated messages are sent directly to your customer, ensuring you never miss an opportunity to engage. Right now, OpenPhone is offering 20% off your first 6 months when you go to openphone.com/LockedInNBA. That's OpenPhone.com/LockedInNBA for $20 off your first 6 months. OpenPhone.com/LockedInNBA. And if you have existing numbers with another service, OpenPhone will port them over at no extra charge. Go check them out. Back at it here on your Mailbag Tuesday edition of the podcast. Again, we'll have mailbag questions also answered over in the newsletter if you want to go and make yourself a new subscriber. If you haven't already, much appreciated to those who have. Next question here in the mailbag rundown comes from JLo6701. No, it is not Jennifer Lopez. It is our pal Jeff from the Discord asking, now that it appears the Raptors are most likely to have a top 5 pick, besides Cooper Flagg, who would your #1 choice be? This is a great question. And the fit is going to matter quite a bit here. I know people, suggest, go for talent over fit. And that's true. In certain cases, 100%. But if it's kind of all things being equal and you feel like the talent's similar with guys, fit's pretty important. Fit is an avenue for guys to reach their peak outcomes. If they join a team that makes sense for them and their skill sets, they're probably going to end up turning out a higher outcome than someone of a similar style or talent level. If their fit isn't quite right. And so I do think fit matters here, and we'll get into, I do think it's hard to find a bad fit with a lot of the top 5 guys. Some are more seamless than others. We'll get into that. But just a reminder of where the Raptors sit in the draft lottery situation at the moment. They are 5th in the lottery odds right now. They have themselves a 16-37 record. They have a 3-game in the loss column cushion on the Brooklyn Nets, who are winning games right now, which is kind of crazy, considering they don't really have any players. Good on Jordi Fernandez. So 16-37, they have the 3-game cushion in the loss column there. They have a 5-game cushion in the loss column on tonight's opponent, the Philadelphia 76ers. And as it stands at the moment, they have a 42.1% chance of jumping into the top 4. Not bad. It's like an Ochai Agbaji 3. You feel all right about that. A 10.5% chance at the #1 overall pick as well. Obviously, there's a chance they move down here as well. And that's, something just under a coin flip of the chances that that'll happen. So it's not guaranteed they're going to pick top 5 by any means, but it's not a bad spot to be in the 5th spot in the odds in a flattened lottery world. Again, the 4th best team has a 48% chance at top 4. The 3 worst teams have the 4th best team, the 4th worst team, that is. The 3 worst teams have a 52.1% chance. So really being at 42.1, not a bad place to be at all for a Raptors team that very clearly has more on-hand talent than any of the teams in this mix at the moment, after the Brandon Ingram trade in particular. So yeah, you look at the top 5. I mean, the top 4 feels like it's kind of taking shape at the moment. The 5th maybe feels a little bit more up to interpretation. I think for me at the moment, my top 5, and look, I'm very early in draft stuff. I'm mostly just going off of, highlight and scouting videos I've watched and reading up on these guys a little bit. I haven't sat down and watched like a full game of, let's say, come on Malawak necessarily. I've watched a couple Duke games because Cooper Flag's a monster and you see a lot of Malawak as a result. But, I'm not super schooled on all these guys. I haven't gone and watched hours and hours and hours of VJ Edgecombe tape just yet. Just going off of what smart people say and the sort of my inferences from there. But the top 4 or 5, Cooper Flag, obviously, Ace Bailey from Rutgers, Dylan Harper, the guard, also from Rutgers. And then you've got, after that, VJ Edgecombe seems like he's making a bit of a rise up the charts with his play at Baylor of late. Kaman Malawak, as I mentioned, the gigantic center for Duke, who's got like an 83% true shooting on the season. Pretty nuts. I guess playing with Cooper Flag is pretty all right for a roll man in that situation. You've got Azanul, you've got Kasparis Yakachonis. You've got lots of different guys after that sort of top 5. But if we're going top 5, I'll just say, for argument's sake, that top 5 is Cooper Flag, Ace Bailey, Dylan Harper, Kama Malawak, and VJ Edgecombe. Let's just say that's what the top 5 for me is. As far as fit, Malawak, I think, is kind of the least obvious one because he's just going to plug in as a backup center. He's sort of a long-term succession plan to Jakob Poeltl. If they're picking 5th, I'm fine with him being the guy. If they're picking higher than that, I think the other 4 guys, I think, would be a little more interesting to me. VJ Edgecombe's fascinating because he figures to be like a damn good, excellent defensive player. The offensive stuff seems to be coming around for him a little bit later, a little bit as the season progresses here for Baylor as well. He dunks everything. We love that. He has experience kind of running and creating for the Bahamas in international play over the course of the summer. That's pretty interesting to me. You've got, with him as well, just the pure athleticism is kind of off the charts. He might be the best athlete of this entire bunch. Cooper Flag, pretty damn good athlete too, though. VJ Edgecombe is like your long-term 2 guard of the future next to Emmanuel Quickley. Pretty interesting. Maybe not the creation upside that a couple of these other guys might bring to the table, but if you're picking 4th and VJ Edgecombe is there, I kind of love the fit. It throws in, a whole lot of questions into the future of RJ Barrett, as most of the guys that could be picked here will, just because, again, he's like the easiest salary to theoretically move. Do you turn him into a couple of depth pieces? Is he your avenue to finding a backup center long-term? That there's all sorts of interesting things to think about with RJ Barrett. I tend to think the Raptors will want to keep him into next year and just see how it all works. But the tax implications of whatever Ingram makes, plus if they move up in the draft and they pick, say, 1 or 2, that's more expensive than picking 4, 5, or 6. That's going to kind of put them closer to the tax as well. And it'll come down to, will they just pay the tax? I kind of just hope they do. I think there's reason to do it. And kind of going off of what Bobby Webster said again last week, the idea that paying the taxes only for the super contender teams is no longer really true. There are a lot of teams that are not super contenders that pay the tax just because it's kind of the cost of doing business and building a competitive team in a very deep league. And so, I think with RJ, VJ obviously throws a big wrench into his future with the team. But I think just a pure fit of a defensive guy like Edgecombe in a lineup with Scotty Barnes, with Poeltl kind of filling in the gaps for your Ingram and Quickley in that theoretical starting 5. I like it quite a bit. Beyond that, I mean, I don't think you can go wrong with any of Ace Bailey, Dylan Harper, or Cooper Flag. Very different fits, right? Cooper Flag is the talent guy. The fit is probably the worst with him in theory because he's not really a proven 3-point shooter, not really proven yet that he's going to be some sort of huge offensive creation hub. And having Flag plus Scotty plus Ingram feels a little janky, feels a little jumbly. It might require a lot of sacrifice and adaptation from all of those guys to make it all work. But that said, you roll out Ingram and Flag and Scotty as your 3-4-5 or your 2-3-4, whatever you want. all of a sudden you're looking like Vision 6'9" might have a shot of actually being pretty effective. And so, yeah, you figure it out down the line. If the fit's not great, you make moves from there. You just get talent on the team first, then sort it out. Cooper Flag, clearly the best talent. He's the strangest fit, but I don't care. You just get him in, and then you probably have yourself a damn good defense at the very least with Flag and Scotty as like maybe the most menacing, terrifying two-man defensive combo there is. It is interesting that if they get Flag, it kind of makes the Ingram trade make a little bit less sense, and it kind of goes back to what I was saying before the Ingram trade. Said it on here a couple times, said it in the newsletter. Like, I think the idea of the Raptors just kind of waiting for the summer, seeing what the draft bears, and then making their move made a little bit more sense. There's a world in which they, draft Flag or don't draft Flag, but get someone else and then say, hey, Brandon Ingram, let's go sign and trade for him or something like that. And maybe they do it then. Obviously, it's a little harder to pull a sign and trade than it is to just trade for a guy in season. And might have other competition for him in the summer. But either way, it's that's the one situation where I think the Ingram trade maybe looks a little strange because it just creates this clutter on the team that can be sorted out. Certainly, these are all pros. They're all very talented. Talent can figure things out, but it does make it a little more sort of jumbled, and the picture gets a little less clean. Well, if you get Ace Bailey, I mean, holy hell. I love the concept of Ace Bailey, who to me kind of profiles a little bit as like new age Trey Murphy the third. I guess Trey Murphy's not very old, but like the new Trey Murphy the third, 6'10", ridiculous range, incredible shot making ability. Like that could be a super fun fit. I'm also pretty high on Ace Bailey becoming a really good defender as well. Just think he's like 6'10". He's enormous. He's got long arms and he's got good instincts. He could be like a help side rim protection guy. You get Ace Bailey, Scotty Barnes, and Brandon Ingram together as a 2-3-4 or a 3-4-5. Once again, pretty exciting. Vision 6'9" truthers feeling very good about themselves in that case. That's a ton of shooting. Ace Bailey is shooting like 37, 38% on crazy high volume and insane difficulty this year at Rutgers. Pretty fascinating to think about an Ingram, Scotty, and Ace Bailey trio kind of fitting with Emmanuel quickly running point. You've got Jakob Poeltl in at center. It makes the Poeltl fit that much better because you have that much more shooting and space around him. That's the other issue with Cooper Flag is Poeltl becomes a really tricky fit, and maybe you look at trying to swap him out. I kind of kicked around in the Lockdown Raptors Discord the idea of like, if you get Flag, could you call up the Pacers and try to do a sign and trade for Miles Turner where Poeltl goes back to the Pacers and Poeltl just kind of offers better rim protection for that team? They still have tons of shooting and space. Maybe that works. You reignite Yakin's skills. That's fun. And Miles Turner becomes your center of the future. Maybe that's expensive. I mean, it's all going to be expensive, man. You're trying to get serious. You're going to pay a lot of money. But, that's just an idea, like a huge theoretical, fantastical possibility. But, like, can you turn Poeltl into more of a spacing big becomes a real question if you get Flag. No, less so if you get Ace Bailey, because that dude is just going to let it rip. And there's just like a lot of fun shooting upside on the team. You factor in him and Gradey Dick and Jacoby Walter, the movement shooting this team would be capable of. Pretty awesome. And then you have Dylan Harper, who I think is probably just the easiest fit of all these guys. You throw him in there. He's your two guard of the future. He's your long-term lead creative offensive engine. Ingram and Scotty work off of that. Emmanuel quickly flies around and uses his off-ball energy to be just this menace for three-point creation. Obviously he'll run some second units. Surely he'll run some offense for you if Dylan Harper can play off ball a little bit. I think that's just like the cleanest, most obvious. Wow, they got Dylan Harper. This thing is hitting go next season. And look, guards take some time. It's not going to be like Dylan Harper walks in and is amazing from day one. But, as like a long-term plan, maybe he's a bench guy next year, runs second units, and then becomes a starter from there. Like that's the high upside. Obviously all these things are high upside if you get one of these top guys in the draft. I think it's a really fun draft. All these guys are probably going to be pretty good. But Dylan Harper, is like such a glove-like easy fit. You roll quickly Harper, Ingram, Scotty, and Yak. What happens to RJ again becomes a very interesting question there, similar to with VJ Edgecombe. It's we'll see how it all shakes out. Again, RJ, like, simply the most fascinating guy to watch this summer, I think, from the team's perspective. But yeah, Harper, throw him in there, man. Oh man, things get real interesting really fast. And the Ingram trade, I think, looks even better if you get a guy like Harper who truly can kind of one day step into being your lead creative force while the other guys kind of fill in the intervening years. We'll come back on the other side, get into a handful of rapid fire questions to close this thing out. 6 man of the year next year, or not maybe 6 man of the year, but who's the better 6 man in theory? Gradey Dick or Jacoby Walter, plus in-season tournament darlings next season. We'll get to that coming up to close things out in just a second. Wrapping it up here, your Mailbag Tuesday edition of the show. Thanks to everyone who sent in questions. If you didn't get a question in, it's because you're probably not in the Discord. Go to the Discord. You can put your questions in the Mailbag chat. It's much appreciated. I'll either get them into the show or into the newsletter. I try my best to get as many in as possible. Don't get to all of them, but if you sent a question, I didn't use it, thank you very much. Ask a better question next time, damn it. All right. Hickey420 asks, who's the better six man for this team in the future? Gradey Dick or Jacoby Walter? I feel like both could easily start, but who would be better in that Lou Williams, Jamal Crawford role? Interesting question. I think, look, there's a very real chance Gradey Dick is coming off the bench next year. Just, if they keep RJ Barrett, if they draft a Dylan Harper or a VJ Edgecombe and they want to give him run with good players in the starting lineup, like Gradey Dick, I think, is the guy who maybe loses his spot most easily here due to the Brandon Ingram trade. Of course, there's a world in which they draft an Edgecombe or a Harper. They then trade RJ for a roster rebalancing move. And then you have Gradey to kind of throw in as your starter in the intervening years. And then eventually probably he becomes a six man. It's all there's so many moving parts here. It's kind of hard to play with all the hypotheticals, but I do think just profile wise, in my sixth man, I kind of want someone who can run the show, who can kind of guide the offense and not completely just commandeer it entirely. I did not love the Lou Williams year. I thought it was kind of a drag. It was not terribly fun to watch for me to see him launch logo threes at the end of every quarter because it simply must be him to take the shot. I like a six man who can kind of facilitate for others. I like the idea of, someone who is sort of, got that like Fred VanVleet back in the day, like a wonderful second unit operator was Fred VanVleet. He could get his own, he could get it for others. I do think of Gradey Dick and Jacoby Walter. I think Gradey's profile is a little bit more obvious as like a fifth option in a starting lineup, a fourth option in a starting lineup, where he's amplifying everybody because of his gravity, because of his off-ball movement, because of the fact that he can shoot and sort of make that next play off the catch, where he drives and makes something else happen. Like he, to me, doesn't quite have the creative upside that a Jacoby Walter does. And so for that reason, I think Gradey's a better fit alongside better players in the starting lineup, while Jacoby might have the juice to kind of guide lesser lineups because he's got a little bit more craft with the ball in his hands. It's still a long ways off, right? We're nowhere near Jacoby Walter being like a true combo guard of any persuasion just yet. He's very much an off-ball guy at the moment, but the flashes of pull-up shooting we've seen, I think his handle's pretty tight and can get better. And as he gets stronger and less 20 years old, I think that's going to be something that he can kind of, he's already a guy who gets the rim a ton, whether it's off of cuts or with his drives. He was a free throw machine in college. I think as he gets stronger and more attuned to the NBA level of physicality, that's going to become a thing that kind of creeps back into his profile as well. That to me is someone who can be a really nice second unit leader and, again, just kind of be out there to facilitate for others while also being able to get his own kind of whenever he needs to, especially against second unit defenses. So yeah, I'd say probably more Jacoby, though. I think Jacoby has, I thought coming out of college, Jacoby Walter had like Hooper brain. It really seemed like that was the type they were getting. He's just not that. He's got such great feel. He's got such great understanding of where to be, great nose for the ball. I think he's going to be, not your Jamal Crawford, Lou Williams, I'm the offense and everything flows through me type of guy. I think just as like a really nice second unit creator who can do it for everybody, not just himself, I think he's probably got an easier path there with his skill set, particularly his handle compared to what Gradey Dick's working with handle wise. And the pull up shooting from Jacoby Walter, again, it's been very small sample. It's only been a handful of them over the last few games, but those little flashes of, he can kind of get into a step back or he can get to a pull up coming around a screen. Pretty interesting stuff, especially considering he's been damn good on pull ups from mid range this year too. Next question here comes from Green Giant JG asking, would an in-season tournament win next year be realistic in this world where the roster stays as is and everyone's contract works out with re-signing BI? Yeah, I think go into next year thinking you can be cup darlings. I think that's a great call. I think this team is going to be pretty good next season, right? Might not be perfect. There are going to be things to work out. There's still going to be waiting on development from some younger players to really fill in all the gaps and make this truly a 10-11 deep squad, which I think they're probably going to be in the next couple of seasons here, provided they can keep everybody. But when you have that many young, interesting guys on rookie contracts, it makes things a whole lot easier. And so, yeah, I think there's a pathway here for this to be kind of a regular season wins, accruing team. We'll see about the postseason viability, but just having a lot of good players is a damn good way to win a lot of games. And if you're winning a lot of games, probably means you're winning your round robin games in the tournament, which can get you in to the big dance. And yeah, again, winning the tournament, hard to do. Only one team does it, but can the Raptors actually, for the first time, be actual characters in an NBA Cup? 100% they can. I think that's a worthy goal to strive for next year. Make a playoff push and also be tournament darlings. That would be a delightful, wonderful year. And we got a troll question here from a troll. This is Kaz. For those who don't know, Kaz is the town fool in the Locked On Raptors Discord, just ranting and raving and having bad takes all over the damn place. Kaz asks, Locked On Raptors host Sean takes control of the Raptors front office during the summer of 2025 after Masai and Bobby get canned, but Sean has Nico-like ambitions to win a title immediately. Who would you trade Scotty Barnes for in an attempt to win now? Must be a trade that theoretically works financially and from an asset return point of view. I'm not going to go in and make an exact replica of a trade in the trade machine right now because I would have to turn off a bunch of the rules and stuff for post deadline. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to noodle on it and theorize a little bit here. The guy who comes to mind is Giannis. It's just so obvious to me. Giannis is amazing. Giannis is still one of the 3 or 4 best players alive. And the Bucks just traded for Kyle Kuzma as their big deadline addition. I don't know, brother. I kind of think the Bucks might be kind of in their last stand, their flailing end to what has been a great run. But at some point, the bill comes due, and the bill is going to be enormous for all of the picks they've traded, for all the moves they've made to now have this team where Brook Lopez is still very good, but very old. You've got Damian Lillard, still very good, but very old by point guard standards and not a very good defender whatsoever. They've been so bad at drafting that the back end of the roster is bereft. They just keep on sending out guys that they've drafted only for them to not work. AJ Johnson and Marjon Beauchamp just at this past deadline alone. They are notoriously awful. This is the Rashad Vaughn drafting team. Since drafting Giannis, they have been an utter disaster. And that is just, again, the bill comes due for that at some point when you have a player of Giannis's caliber. This isn't to say Giannis is going to go agitate for a trade. I genuinely think he just likes being in Milwaukee and maybe he's happy to stay there. But if they get to the end of the season in Milwaukee and there's a playoff exit and things haven't gone very well and people start looking around and saying, is Giannis going to be available? Is it Giannis? You call the Bucks and look, yeah, it's going to cost you Scotty Barnes plus a lot of other stuff to get Giannis Antetokounmpo. But I think because this team is now kind of working with some functional depth, because the new Chris Middleton just dropped and Brandon Ingram, because you have, I think, a team that you could, in theory, absorb Giannis into, especially if you make this trade after Scotty's deal flips over to the max as of July 1. You can get there with Scotty and a couple other, maybe RJ or whomever else. I think there's an avenue to making a deal that makes a lot of sense for the Raptors, especially, maybe it involves the pick. Maybe they pick 3rd or 4th and that has to be included. Fine. You get Giannis Antetokounmpo. That's okay. I think Giannis could win with a lot of what they have here. It's that. This is the only guy who really comes to mind, right? The only realistic one who might be available this summer. I suppose Devin Booker is an interesting one as well, though I'm not sure you're trading Scotty Barnes for Devin Booker. Maybe in a world where you draft Cooper Flagg and you're getting real crazy and real ambitious and you're trying to, hit go on this roster and really accelerate things. Maybe a Scotty for Booker deal makes some sense, obviously with all the other stuff you'd need to throw in to make it work money-wise and picks-wise and everything. That's another theoretical one here. These are the dumb questions that Stupid Cause makes me think of. It's dumb. None of this is happening, but we did it anyway because the town fool is very loud. Anyway, thanks, Cause. You're the best. We love you. Good luck in the Locked On Raptors Fantasy League. I hope you lose because I don't want you on the damn show if you win. Either way, we love our listeners here at the show. We love them very much. We're going to leave it there. Thank you so much for rocking with the show. Follow, subscribe, rate, review. Come ask better questions than Cause in the Discord. Join it for free. Link in the description of the podcast. You can go to the QR code on the screen or the link in the description to subscribe to the newsletter. It makes me feel very good when you do that. And yeah, we'll be back again tomorrow. Talk about Raptors Sixers. We got Raptors Cavs to talk about on Thursday as well. And we will round it out Friday with a little toxic positivity, as we always do here on the show. All that coming up as the week progresses. Thanks so much, as always, for rocking with us. We'll talk to you very, very soon. Thanks for hanging. Bye-bye. Not even close.